Allies of Humanity, Book 3, The Third Briefing, The Tools for the Intervention. We must speak on the intervention that is occurring in your world in light of the 3 requirements for freedom. First, you must see that intervention is part of nature. It is bound to occur. It is destined to happen. Anyone who has power in the universe must face the risk of intervention, competition, and intrusion. Anyone who has gained an advantage in any way, technological advantage or rare and valuable resources, will have to face the problem of intervention and competition in the universe. It is a universal problem, and that again is why the whys remain hidden. That again is why humanity must learn to be extremely discreet. You are living in a world of tremendous natural diversity and biological resources. Those who are intervening in your world today are not interested in the resources that you hold most dear. They are interested in biological resources, particularly those resources that represent the building blocks of life: genetic agents, chlorophyll, blood, and plasma. These are the things that are valuable and are greatly needed in a universe full of barren worlds. Some of this represents illegal trade that is not allowed for ethical reasons, but trade that exists nonetheless. Rare metals are also sought here, metals that you are aware of and metals that you are not aware of. These things must be mined with human assistance. Anything that a foreign race seeks to do in this world must have significant human assistance. This is because of the biological barrier that this world presents to the universe and to those races who have evolved in sterile environments, who are not adapted to be in biological terrestrial environments such as this. Because worlds such as this are very rare, there are very few races in the universe who have this adaptation. That is why the native races must be cultivated and genetically aligned with the intervening races. It is a time-consuming process, but the results are believed to be worth it by those who are engaging in such activities. The intervention is of 2 kinds. There are resource explorers, which nearly always represent one race, operating with great freedom and impunity, which are clients of larger powers. Sometimes they are clients of independent trading networks that are engaged in illegal trade. Those resource explorers who have been in your world and who are in your world today represent members of this group. Then there are collectives who are multiracial, hierarchical, and very well organized. Their worker classes are bred for specific purposes, and they are involved in collective breeding, which is a practice not all advanced races are engaged in. The collectives seek a more permanent residence in this world. They seek it as a world that either they or their clients could own and govern from afar, with human assistance. That is why such great care has been taken to study human psychology, human physiology, and your reproductive process, as well as the biological hazards that exist on Earth. That is one of the reasons that plant samples have been taken and the world has been observed for such a very long time. It is perhaps surprising for you to realize that an advanced technological race would have difficulty adapting to your world, believing that their science and medical technology would have overcome the difficulties involved here. But alas, so great are these difficulties that there is no race who has evolved in sterile or near-sterile environments that could easily withstand the biological agents that exist here. Even the illnesses of your animals could affect them. So great is this hazard that in recent history, few races have attempted colonization of this world. But now the collectives see an advantage, for humanity has built networks that they can use, worldwide communications, worldwide resource extraction, and a sufficient level of technology that can, at a basic level, interface with what they use and rely upon. Humanity is also developing greater sources of destructive power, and should this power be fully cultivated, then interventions such as this kind would be more difficult to attempt. Lastly, there is the deterioration of your natural environment, which is threatening many of the very resources that the intervention seeks. That is why the intervention has gone into its mature phase in the last half-century, an accelerated phase involving 4 fundamental activities: the attempt to persuade certain individuals in positions of power in government, commerce and religion, to establish a physical presence and familiarity within the world itself, to influence religious views and tendencies, which also includes the promotion of human conflict, and the program of hybridization to establish adapted beings in a human form who are allegiant to the intervention and who can assume greater governing powers here in the world. These 4 interrelated programs represent the activities of the collectives. Resource explorers operate in a more simple manner, by taking things they need from the world as they are able to find them. But the collectives have a more complex and long-range plan in establishing power and influence within this world. They recognize the strengths and weaknesses of the human family and your tendency towards conflict. They recognize that to gain human allegiance, which is their goal, they must present themselves as capable of assisting and even saving humanity from its own problems and from the great challenges that it now faces. The intervention will present itself, therefore, in a more enlightened form, as spiritual agents, as those who have overcome war and conflict, who live in peace and who have achieved technology that humanity can now use, and indeed now needs in order to rescue its environment and to bring a cessation of conflict in the world. Yet this all represents deception, for the collectives actually seek to increase human conflict, to weaken the strongest worldly powers, and to gain allegiance through human failure, allegiance and a reliance upon their presence. Their interbreeding program is not only to establish individuals in positions of power, but also to condition and to program those that they take to become the intervention's representatives and apologists, those who will promote the intervention and the peoples of the world having direct access to these intervening powers, bypassing their governments, bypassing human authority figures, in order to establish direct contact with those forces who are conditioning people to believe that the intervention is here on their behalf. It is a clever approach and well conceived, and so far it is progressing with very little human resistance. Even the governments of the world have been seduced in many ways. They have made contracts with the intervention, which the intervention has violated, and now there are those within the governments of the world who are aware of the intervention and who support it, and there are those who are aware of it and who oppose it. So the seeds of conflict and opposition have been sown within the corridors of power, within your nation's governments, many of them. The intervention is being carried out by physical beings who are driven by the same needs that drive humanity: the need for resources, the need for power, the need for wealth, and the need for strategic advantage. It is these very things that drive all nations in the universe. You must not regard these beings as evil or demonic, or as angelic. They are beings driven by the same needs that drive humanity. It is important now that we address the question of how the intervention is functioning within the context of the 3 primary requirements that humanity must meet and must utilize in order to become a free race in the universe. The intervention does not value freedom. It is unknown amongst its participants. It will, therefore, seek to oppose or undermine any progress that humanity will attempt to make regarding these 3 fundamental requirements. Human unity will be opposed because a united human family will be very difficult to influence. Human conflict can be so easily antagonized, increased and directed. The intervention does not want to see humanity unite in facing the greater community. Therefore, human conflict will be encouraged, particularly by those hybridized individuals who have assumed positions in advising human leaders. It is their advising roles that have the most influence here. These are not individuals that you will see, for they are not public. They are hidden and well placed. However, they have their opponents within governments, for there is a struggle going on within the secret corridors of governments, and that is why the intervention has sought to influence commercial powers even more than government officials. For commercial powers are governed by greed. They seek wealth, power, predominance, and advantage over their rivals. They do not have public scrutiny and are not accountable to people at large, and so they are much more likely candidates for the plan of the intervention to gain human representatives and human liaisons. Human unity will be opposed by the intervention, for a united humanity will oppose intervention. It will become increasingly resistant to any attempt by any foreign power to gain access or advantage here. That is why the emphasis for the intervention is to amplify human crises, human conflicts, human disagreements, and to encourage the proliferation of weapons to lead humanity further in its own self-determined path of destruction. A weakened humanity will be vulnerable to persuasion, and a weakened humanity will be more likely to respond to offers of technology, to offers of assistance in governance, and to offers of becoming connected to trade networks that already exist in the universe. If humanity declines, it will be hard for either your leaders or your peoples to turn down offers of technology and the resources that will be provided for you. Offers that will surely undermine your self-determination and make you dependent upon networks of trade, commerce and power over which you will have no influence or control. These activities are not evil in the sense that you might think. They represent competition, and competition is part of nature. If you are to be powerful, others will compete with you. If you possess wealth, others will compete with you for this wealth. If you misuse the world, others will seek to take advantage of this for themselves. And if you remain divided, others will try to use that to their advantage. Regarding resource depletion, the intervention will support the overuse of these resources that you rely upon for your basic energy requirements, for they do not need these resources. The depletion of these resources will further hasten humanity's conflicts and decline. Therefore, the overuse of such resources and people's desire to maintain their current behavior will be encouraged. A foreign agent here would need only encourage you to do what you have been doing all along, for practical reasons, to maintain wealth and power, to maintain your nation's stability and to maintain its predominance over other nations. These agents will provide this advice to your leaders, and especially to the leaders in commerce, who always will seek profit and advantage. Since the intervention represents commercial forces, they are particularly focused on aligning themselves with human commercial forces in your world. Here they share a common purpose and many common methods, and they can appeal to individuals who have this focus and this intent. Who amongst the powerful and the elite in your commerce and trade within this world could refuse the offer of advanced technology and refuse the offer of proprietary rights to something that none of their rivals possesses? Who could refuse the opportunity to engage in trade and commerce with powerful forces beyond this world? Leaders in commerce are not accountable to the public, to the people of your world. They are not scrutinized. Their positions are secure. They do not need to win public favor in order to proceed in their search for power. Who amongst them will refuse the offers of advanced technology and trade with other nations and the wealth, power and advantage that such engagements might promise? Even your religious leaders will be encouraged to align themselves with the intervention. They will be encouraged to believe that the intervention represents advanced life forms, morally and ethically advanced, beyond anything that humanity has established, and that humanity must turn to them now for inspiration and for guidance. These religious leaders will be led to believe that the intervention is here as an act of providence, an act of God, to safeguard humanity and to assure its future. It is their beliefs and their emphasis that will be exploited here, for they are not able to see clearly and discern the meaning and the reality of the greater community. Amongst those who are rebellious and who seek to foster revolution, the intervention will give them inspiration. It can whisper in their minds. It can present images in front of them, images of their saints, images of their gods, images of the righteousness of their cause. Those individuals who cannot distinguish a greater community presence from a spiritual manifestation will not be able to resist. Now they will feel that they have divine will and support for their political goals. Now they will feel justified in taking any action, no matter how destructive, in order to fulfill their beliefs and their sense of justice. None of these inspirations comes from a divine source. For the Creator of the universe would never support human conflict. But for a conflicted race of beings living in a beautiful world that is valued by others, this conflict represents a critical advantage to an intervening force. Here, a much smaller force can overwhelm a much greater force. The collectives are a very small presence in the world, and yet they can have great advantage here, encouraging governments to take actions not in their best interest, and encouraging conflicts that will only lead both sides to a greater decline and impoverishment. They can promote the use of the world's resources in such a way that would only lead to humanity's decline and the collapse of societies, and even civilization itself. The intervention is exploiting your weakness, and that is why you must cultivate your strength. You must see that your predispositions towards conflict and division are inherently self-destructive and render your position weak and vulnerable in the face of the greater community. Human unity and cooperation will be essential for humanity's future if you are to remain and to grow as a free race of peoples in the universe. The intervention will oppose this, for that will counter its goals and even its presence here in this world. Regarding the issue of discretion, the intervention wants to know everything about you, how to govern your views, how to motivate your feelings, how to stimulate your emotions, how to make you behave in the ways that it wants you to behave. For control of the human mind and perception is essential to its ultimate goals of governance in this world. Human discretion, therefore, runs counter to the intervention's objectives and will be discouraged. Only in keeping the intervention's secrets will humanity's discretion be supported. Only in hiding its agenda and forgetting what individuals have been told and the often brutal experiments that they have been subjected to as they were taken from their homes and their families against their will. Here forgetfulness will be encouraged, even with threats of violence. The intervention does not want the human population to know its real activities and its real intent. It does not want to see humanity become more powerful. It does not want to see humanity gain insulation from the greater community. For the intervention is here to establish dependence and cooperation. This is their pathway to success, a pathway that is not being sufficiently resisted within your own world. The power of knowledge is the sacred intelligence placed within each individual. The power of knowledge is unknown to the intervention, for if it were known, there would be no intervention, and such unethical behavior would not be attempted. The greater powers of humanity are not being used, and humanity is being encouraged to behave in ways that are not in its best interests. While it is true that humanity could commit all of its errors on its own, to have the support of the intervention only makes the hazards greater. This is being done in a completely hidden way. While the intervention will present itself to its believers and its advocates as a benign and spiritual force, in reality it will be supporting the very forces that undermine humanity's integrity, its unity and its self-confidence. The intervention will undermine people's belief and confidence in their leaders and their institutions, thus fostering a vacuum of confidence that can easily be shifted to a foreign power that is presenting itself as a benign and advanced race. This is the nature of deception that is placed upon a weak and divided humanity, a deception generated by several competing groups of economic collectives who seek to have advantage here. Such activities and deception have been used by humanity as well, so these are understandable to you. Technology only aids the intervention in remaining hidden and in giving it certain powers over people's physical response to their presence. But it is the power of persuasion in the mental environment, the power of making people think what the intervention wants them to think, to feel what the intervention wants them to feel, and to do what the intervention wants them to do, that represents its greatest strength and advantage here. The intervention cannot use force, and it is not a military presence, so it does not have this capability. It will use its greatest strength, which is the power of persuasion, and it is using this to great effect. It has not won its objective yet. It has not achieved its goals yet. But every day the intervention grows stronger. Every day its influence becomes more pervasive. Every day its effort to pacify human resistance and to direct human activity increases, for it seeks to pacify those who would resist it and to encourage human conflict at the same time. The intervention is here to encourage the loss of faith in human leadership and in human institutions. It is here to strengthen its presence as the saviors of humanity. Whether the reins of power would be given to it publicly and visibly, or whether it would occur behind the scenes, the intervention needs tremendous human assistance and support. It must do this to satisfy those who are watching its presence here from afar, and it must do this to gain ascendancy in the world without destroying the world's resources or endangering their ultimate goals here. You have the power to resist this. You have the power to resist this and many other forms of intrusion that will be attempted in the future. Humanity does not know its own strength, and that is why it is so vulnerable. Humanity does not recognize its advantage in living in a highly populated region of space where military conquest is not allowed and where war and violence are rare. You do not realize the advantage this gives you. If you raise your voice against the intervention, it is put at risk. If you oppose the intervention, if enough people can do this, the intervention must withdraw. Other attempts will be made in the future, for the world is a prize and humanity is part of the value of the world for those who seek to have it for themselves. This is the nature of life in the universe. The advancement of technology does not override these tendencies. It does not eliminate corruption and deception. It makes the acquisition of resources more urgent and more difficult to accomplish, and it makes worlds such as yours, which contains such a wealth of biological materials, amazingly valuable to other races who seek to use these things and have access to them for themselves. Surely you must know and understand that if you have power and wealth in the universe, there will be competition. Only if you believed that you were truly alone and isolated in space could you think otherwise. But you are not alone, and you are not isolated. Now that you have gained a certain degree of technological ability and have built a technology for others to use, the motivation for intervention will become stronger, and the attempt to gain human allegiance and to gain the reins of power will be invested in greatly. Yet, as we have said, humanity has the power to offset the intervention, to build a boundary between itself and the universe, and to establish its own rules of engagement regarding who may visit here and under what circumstances visitation may occur. You have not assumed this power, but it is there for you to assume, and assume it you must. It is this emphasis and humanity's overall vulnerability that can create a sufficient motivation for human unity and cooperation to be established at a greater level. Humanity must establish unity, self-sufficiency, and discretion. It must learn how to do this over time, using whatever resources are at its disposal. If human unity is to provide freedom in the future, it must be a unity based upon consensus and awareness and a greater community understanding. It is this awareness and understanding that we wish to support in these series of briefings. We are not here to provide what people may want to hear out of curiosity or fascination, but instead to provide those things that are essential for your progress and for the defense of your world. For you do not know your vulnerability, and you do not know your strength. These must become known to you. If you do not know your vulnerability, you will not see the need for your strength, and if you do not realize your strength, your vulnerability can overtake you. This is life in your world and life throughout the universe. This is what every race must face if it is to become strong and free. This is the responsibility that comes with power and wealth. You possess some power and a great deal of wealth in the resources of this world. Therefore you must become responsible, and your people must be united in this cause. If they are kept in ignorance regarding the greater community, they will not understand the great need of humanity, and their focus and their activities will not support the establishment of human unity, self-sufficiency, and discretion.